Another anarchy video. I guess this is going to be a routine. I guess I'll title it economics or something, and subtitle it for what part of economics we're talking about. But it's an issue with democracy too. I mean, these people really are crazy. So anyway, Luke made another video, and what I really want to get to is this guy called StephBot. Some English guy, got some sort of radio show, sells books, does 40-minute videos. Whatever, he did a video on World War I and II, and it's insane. It's just completely insane rubbish. And apparently this is the guru for Luke the Kook. So now it's understandable how these people are so crazy. I mean, this whole conspiracy crap. I mean, it is such nonsense. Well, I'll get to the Steph guy later, but anyway, Luke's video. So he does a video again explaining to us how it's just way over too much for him to explain all this stuff, and it's all at least he concedes it's all something made up in their heads. There's no practical model, there's no demonstration of any of this having any credibility at all. But he spends this whole video again just rambling about ownage videos and bullshit, and doesn't get to anything until the last minute, and then explains one little part here about how in his little universe the protection the public would have is that there would be all these organizations they would pay other companies to inspect products, and so companies would also want to pay them to have their products inspected by them. Like it's like this is some sort of seal of approval, like Consumer Reports or something, as if all that extra work, all these extra people, like let's say you had 3 or 4 different organizations inspecting everything, it's all be redundant. We'd all have to pay for it somehow. I mean, all these expenses go into the price of a product. And this is the silly, he's talking about the efficiencies. Where's the efficiency in redundancy? Even in his whole argument about this competition, you want a business competition that isn't creating redundancy. I've sort of talked about that with utilities and such. It would be a horrible waste to have separate road systems, separate electrical lines, separate gas mains. I mean, all these things, these infrastructure items, you couldn't have redundant companies. It would be idiotic. Laying this, the telephone poles couldn't carry all the friggin' cables that would be running. So I mean, it's just silly. There has to be there's a practical limit, and then, like I said, we all pay for that extra infrastructure. Ideally, we want to just pay for that once and have it upgraded where it needs to be upgraded when it has to be, and that's it. But to pay for redundant, let's say there was 3 cable companies and they all had separate cables. We're paying for this redundant hardware, and like I said, it all has to be paid for. There's no you can't create separate businesses that do all these different other replace all this regulatory infrastructure by inspection and all this other crap. All these people have to be paid. It's like the Michael Jordan tax. It's just like putting another tax on products, because you still have to pay for all that infrastructure. And it's just silly. It's just silly. I mean, a regulation can cost us nothing, where a fleet of independent companies doing consumer protection would cost a fortune, and who would pay it? The consumers certainly wouldn't pay for it. We know what consumers will do. So it's ludicrous. And then he makes some point about how monopolies are okay as long as it's not government. Well, yeah, we made some point about how government has a monopoly in the public safety arena, and that's just idiotic. The government doesn't stop any private companies from doing public safety crap. It doesn't stop them at all. It's not like the post office or something. They're not protecting their interests there. Any business can get in that business tomorrow. And unfortunately, they can't make any money. It's like the Better Business Bureau and such. And, you know, there's not enough people support it. So anyway, we made this point that, you know, a business that could give us, you know, brand new cars for 1 penny, or whatever his analogy was, you know, it should be a monopoly, because, yeah, how can you compete with something that good? And it's just idiotic, because no business is ever going to give the consumer a deal. They're always going to push it as far as they can to the consumer's tolerance. We know that. We see what happens. Even look at YouTube. I mean, you can't even contact this company, you know, billion-dollar company, and you can't contact it, you know, because it's not a priority. They know no one's going to disappear just because they can't get an email through. You know, no one's not going to quit viewing, and that's all they care about is the viewers. They don't care about the producers. Well, anyway, just ludicrous argument. So let's get to this Steph Bot guy. Really crazy. He does this thing on the World War, and it has to be just insipid. And so he calls himself a historian, says he's got a degree, and it was just the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I mean, World War II was all caused by public education. Did you know that? And public education caused World War II. And that, you know, in the 1800s, we had freedom of choice in terms of education choice. What a ludicrous remark to make. He calls himself a historian. What freedom of choice was there? There was no public education in the 1800s. And what there was, I mean, not mandated, was on a community level, and obviously people couldn't travel very far as a practical matter to get to a school. So I mean, you had to, you know, there was not 5 local schools and you went, oh, I'll go to the one that's, you know, 3/4 of a mile away, I'll go to the one that's, you know, only a half mile away. No, fuck that. You were lucky if there was one within 3 miles, and that's about the limit of how far people could realistically go, how much time they could waste getting to a school. So just the stupidest point to make. But anyway, this whole argument that, you know, it was this indoctrination through public education that created war is just so silly. And so he has this whole preposterous theory, and it comes down to is that nobody really should have fought in World War II. I mean, they should just let the Nazis do whatever they wanted, and it all would have been okay because they would have fallen like Rome. That's his expectation. And this whole idea that we can, you know, because Rome fell, we're going to use that example forever. You know, because empires fell in the past where we didn't have machine guns and nuclear weapons and automobiles and jet planes, you know, in a completely different world, you know, where you could kill one person and take over a country, one king. Yeah, it's a different world, fuckers, you know. I mean, get with the program. Anyway, I mean, just the whole idea of saying that, you know, Germany really wasn't anything. These were incredibly powerful, you know, and then this whole theory too is that, you know, he's maligning these horrible socialist governments, and yet these horrible socialist governments in Germany and Japan, these small tiny countries, created this huge productive economy that was able to produce this huge war machine. I mean, think about, you know, what these small countries did. And the Nazis, and think how many Russians died. You know, I think it's 10 million, and he doesn't, that's just, oh yeah, well, you know, the Germans wasted, you know, a percentage of their army in Russia. But no credit to how that got wasted. You know, it's a lot of people had to die to stop Germany. And what would have happened in Africa if no one was there to stop the Nazis? They would have, what if they took all of North Africa and then the Middle East, and just think of with all that oil, that would have been a hell of a Rome, right? You know, if they had control of all that oil, that's an empire that would be awful hard to ever get rid of. And yeah, I don't think they posed an immediate threat to the United States, but like I said, if they would have gotten into the Middle East, if they would have gotten all those resources, you know, by the 50s or 60s, we would have been in big trouble. We would have been a third world country, because they would have the world economy. And so, you know, just I hate to tell somebody to go watch a 40-minute video. I mean, the first half of it is just kind of nonsense, where he just kind of goes through how it's, the Federal Reserve's fault that the Great Depression happened, and that precipitated the war, and that the First World War was really the cause of the Second World War because of the Versailles Treaty. And some of that is true, but a lot of it isn't true.
In Germany, that took place, the whole reason why they became as powerful as they were is because they moved from a World War I class society where people were really stuck in a class. I mean, if your father was a shoemaker, you were a shoemaker. I mean, it was a really closed society. And yeah, they did move to a more socialist, but more open in terms of people were allowed to expand into other fields. They weren't stuck in their class anymore.